Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. Our previous episode, number 62, we saw the duality of Purusha and Prakriti. Unlike the first duality, which was Brahman and Maya, in which Maya was experienced as an illusion and world appears to be an illusion, in this particular experience of duality of Purusha and Prakriti, the world, the nature, it appears to be mechanical, the machinery of nature, which our physics tells us, the machinery of nature studied in depth. But yogins, in the process of going inward, discovering the pure self, static self, which seems to be doing nothing, and separate from this mechanical nature. But as we dive deeper into that journey, there is a separative movement of this Purusha consciousness, pure being standing back, liberating itself. But when we go deeper, we can arrive at a unity principle when they come together, where Prakriti reveals herself to be not a mechanical nature, but a conscious force. And there are, again, the two poles of one being, and the currents between the two, bringing out the whole manifestation. And what appears as a mechanical nature is nothing but the projection coming from the Purusha. And all the movements, our intimate, inner, subjective movements, experiences, all that, the world of forms, everything is sustained by the sanction from that witnessing consciousness, who is essentially the Lord presiding over. It is with his sanction the Prakriti unfolds into manifestation. And these two aspects, static and dynamic, are essentially one inseparable, one being in two poises, static, dynamic, two poles, having two currents connecting the two, bringing out the worlds in which we live. Now, Sri Aurobindo is taking us to the third duality. This is the episode number 63. And for those who are new here, this is part 1 of the Synthesis of Yoga, chapter 4, the sacrifice, the triune path, and the Lord of the sacrifice. We will be reading from paragraph number 25. The link to this chapter is in the description. I highly recommend you to follow the text so that we can travel together and imbibe the thought patterns of Sri Aurobindo, and through that his force can enter us and reformat our consciousness into that integral vision. On yet another line of approach, the seeker meets another corresponding but in aspect distinct duality, in which the bion character is more immediately apparent, the dynamic duality of Ishwara-Shakti. This is the third duality, Ishwara-Shakti. We see the term Shakti coming in the context of Tantra. It is in Tantric schools, the Shakti worship and Ishwara-Shakti, all that come into the picture. There they are seen as bion character. That is one being in two aspects. So yet another line of approach, the seeker meets another corresponding but in aspect distinct duality. Duality he uses capital D here because these are dualities right at the source level. One being appearing as two, or rather two aspects of one being, static and dynamic. Brahman, Maya, Purusha, Prakriti, Ishwara, Shakti. In the case of Ishwara Shakti, the bion aspect is much more immediately apparent, unlike Brahman and Maya, where that connection is not apparent. It is only when you deepen the experience, you arrive at the biune nature, that means one being in two poises, that will become clear. Same with Purusha Prakriti, the biune nature is not clear. Purusha and Prakriti seems to be separate, and there is a separative experience of Purusha liberating, separating. Whereas as we go deeper into that journey, eventually you will discover there are two aspects, static and dynamic aspects of one being. So the biune aspect, whereas in the case of Ishwara-Shakti, it is much more apparent that these are two poises of one being. The biune character is more immediately apparent, the dynamic duality of Ishwara-Shakti. On one side, he is aware. He here is the seeker, the yogin who is diving deep into these realms of experience. On one side, he is aware of an infinite and self-existent Godhead in being. Infinite and self-existent Godhead in being. It is self-existent. It has no dependency on anything that is outside. It is self-existent. It is not a result of something. It is the fundamental existence. Self-existent Godhead in being, who contains all things in an ineffable potentiality of existence. So this self-existent Godhead, it contains everything in an ineffable potentiality. Potentially, it contains everything. Out of that potentiality, it brings out the worlds. A self of all selves, a soul of all souls, a spiritual substance of all substances. Substances. Matter is a form of substance. Within matter itself, there is solid, liquid, gaseous. That is classification within matter as substance. Then there are subtler forms of substance. For example, when we are in the dream world, that world too is composed of substance, but it is much more fluid, subtle than the gross material substance. So there is a hierarchy of substances, and there is substance of all substances, original substance, the pure Sat, existence. That substance of all substances, self of all selves, soul of all souls, an impersonal, inexpressible existence. On one hand, it is impersonal and inexpressible existence, but at the same time, an illimitable person, person with capital P. On one side, it appears to be impersonal. On the other side, on the other hand, it is appearing as illimitable person, who is here self-represented in numberless personality. Here means in the manifest world, it is self-represented in multiplicity of numberless personality. A master of knowledge, a master of forces, Lord of love, a Lord of love and bliss and beauty, a single origin of the worlds, a self-manifester and self-creator, a cosmic spirit, a universal mind, a universal life, a conscious and living reality, supporting the appearances which we sense as unconscious, inanimate matter. It's a long sentence, but you can see a certain gradation Sri Aurobindo is coming from. Starting from Sachidananda, going all the way down to matter. I read that once again so that you get the underlying structure. Impersonal, inexpressible existence. Existence with capital E. Sat. Existence. Sat. But at the same time, an illimitable person. There is this being. One being is also illimitable person, who is also that conscious being, Chit, who is master of self represented in numberless personality, master of knowledge, master of forces, a lord of love and bliss and beauty. That is where the whole Satchidananda is covered. Love and beauty and bliss. Lord of love and bliss and beauty. That is the Ananda dimension. Master of forces. That's the Chit Shakti dimension. The master of knowledge. That's where Sat, the pure being and its knowing, comes into picture. Master of knowledge, master of forces, master of love and bliss and beauty, a single origin of the worlds. That's the single origin of the worlds. A self-manifester and self-creator. From there it creates the worlds. A cosmic spirit, universe, a cosmic spirit. That's cosmic spirit, the whole, it's presiding over the whole cosmos. Now he's coming to mind, life and body, the triple lower world. A universal mind, a universal life. What is referred as three worlds, Manomayam, Pranamayam, Annamayam. The universal mind, universal life, the conscious and living reality, capital R. There is this being and its reality. It's not only transcendent, it is presiding over this whole world, all the way supporting the appearance which we sense as unconscious inanimate matter, all the way down to matter. Even in matter, there is a divine reality supporting it, presiding over behind it, upholder of that. So a cosmic spirit, a universal mind, a universal life, a conscious and living reality supporting the appearance which we sense as unconscious inanimate matter. So Sat, Chit, Ananda, supermind, mind, life, body, matter. The whole spectrum, there is this Ishwara, the master, who is presiding over everything. It is the single source of all things. It is self of all selves, soul of all souls, spiritual substance of all substances, an impersonal, inexpressible existence, but at the same time, an illimitable person who is here self-represented in numberless personality, a master of knowledge, a master of forces, a lord of love and bliss and beauty, a single origin of the worlds, a self-manifester and self-creator, a cosmic spirit, a universal mind, a universal life, the conscious and living reality supporting the appearances which we sense as unconscious inanimate matter. Such a perspective, like Aurobindo is looking at the entire spectrum of existence, all the planes of existence, all the way from Sat, Chit, Ananda, all the way down to matter. And he's describing all these levels. Only a yogi can describe it from that, even to see that vision. On the other side, he becomes aware of the same Godhead in effectuating consciousness and power. So the same Godhead who is presiding over the entire spectrum from matter to the highest. On one side, there is this self, substance of all substances, master of all. On the other side, there is an effectuating consciousness and power, put forth as self-aware force. This power that is effectuating consciousness and power, a self-aware force that contains and carries all within her and is charged to manifest it in the universal time and space. There is a universal time and space where the manifestation is unfolding as a process in which all the figures of nature appears in time and space. So this is emerging from that master consciousness, which is presiding across the spectrum, and it is projecting from it, and there is this conscious force effectuating consciousness and power, put forth as a self-aware force that contains and carries within her. So this force contains and carries within her and is charged to manifest. So she is in charge of manifesting out of nothingness, out of the infinite potentiality beyond time and space. It takes out of that, it is charged with it. It is a self-aware conscious force, and it is manifesting in the universal time and space. It is evident to him that here there is one supreme and infinite being. That is evident, represented to us in two different sides of itself, obverse and reverse in relation to each other. So there is one being having two sides, two different sides of itself, obverse and reverse in relation to each other. All is either or pre-existent in the Godhead in being. Everything is pre-existent in the being. Being here is capital B. That one being who is behind the existence. It is supporting everything. Everything is pre-existent in it and issues from it and is upheld by its will and presence. This being has its will and presence, both with capital W, capital P. So there is issuing forth. The creation is like issuing forth from the potentiality, infinite potentiality, pre-existent, out of the pre-existent potentiality of the being, out of that issues forth from it and is upheld by the will and presence. So whatsoever is put forth, it has to be upheld by a will, it has to be upheld by a presence that carries it forward. All is brought out, carried in movement by the Godhead in power. All becomes and acts and develops by her. She is the Godhead in power, and is in her its individual or its cosmic purpose. And in her its individual or its cosmic purpose. So things that are put forward from the infinite potentiality of the being can have its individual purpose or a cosmic purpose. When we speak about purpose, we think about our individual purpose. Then there is a society, that society has its purpose. And there are nations having its own purpose. Then there is a whole human civilization having one evolutionary destiny, a purpose. And there's a earth and her evolution having a purpose, which is getting fulfilled through the evolution of the human species on earth. And then there is this whole cosmos and its purpose. So there is the force that is propelling or issuing forth into time and space, out of what is called the pre-existent potentiality. Out of that, it is projecting, issuing forth into time and space, and presiding over it with its will and presence. That is the Godhead in power. It's presiding over whatsoever is set in motion, whether it is individual or cosmic purpose. It presides over it, ensures that it is unfolding according to that original intention from with which it has been projected into time and space. It is because of seeing things in this level, Sri Aurobindo can make statements like supramental manifestation is decreed, or this civilization will rise, that civilization will fall, this movement, social movement is bound to succeed. It is set in motion. So from that point of view, one can see there is a presiding will and force that is overseeing the manifestation in time and space. It is again a duality necessary for the manifestation, creating and enabling that double current of energy. So he is coming back to the same duality, double current of two poles of one being. A duality necessary for the manifestation. Duality is often seen as a problem. Therefore, there is this whole tendency towards non-dual Advaita. Whereas Sri Aurobindo is bringing in the very role of duality, its creative function. Why duality is there? What is its function? And he has described already the first duality, Brahman Maya, then second duality, Purusha Prakriti. Now he is bringing in the third duality, Ishwara-Shakti. And duality is the essential method of the creative process, of which there are two poles, one being arriving at, or rather manifested as two poles of one being. And there are two currents connecting the two. On one side is static, other side is dynamic, and there are these two currents, double current of energy, which seem always necessary for the world working, two poles of the same being. And we can see that even in the design of our, say, electric battery, there are two poles, negative and positive. That is through which the energy flows, and that runs all the machines. Or if you look at a marketplace, there is a buyer and seller coming together. These are like a plus and minus of a battery. It is when these are connected, there is the flow of trade that is happening. And we see everywhere in the system design, there is an input and output. There is the flow between the two. Everywhere duality is necessary, even structurally. There is a compression and tension that coming together that creates all the architectural forms. There is always the duality at work if we are to create world of forms. So in the manifestation, the duality is central part of the process. And this duality doesn't deny oneness. There is one being who has two poises, static poise, dynamic poise. It is again a duality necessary for the manifestation, creating and enabling that double current of energy, which seem always necessary for the world workings, two poles of the same being, but here closer to each other and always very evidently carrying each the power of the other in its essence and its dynamic nature. It very much reminds you of the yin yang of Chinese symbolism, where that yin contains the dot of yang and yang contains the dot of yin in it. So both, even though there is polarity of one being, in each pole the other is contained in essence and as well as in its dynamic possibility. So in matter, the spirit is involved. In the spirit, matter is involved. From the spirit, everything gets projected and become matter. From matter, involved spirit pushes forward, evolution happens. So there is this dynamic interplay between the two. So it is again a duality necessary for the manifestation, creating and enabling that double current of energy, which seem always necessary for the world workings, two poles of the same being, but here closer to each other, and always very evidently carrying each the powers of the other in its essence and in its dynamic nature. And interestingly, it is the same duality in manifestation of human species, though it's one being, manifest as duality of man and woman. And they are symbolically representing this polarity of one being. And there's a current that connects the two. And when they connect, it is through that connection the progeny comes and birthing and the whole process continues. So we can see even in the design of a species into polarity of male principle, female principle, there it is part of a larger cosmic creative polarity that is present everywhere at every level. And Ishwara-Shakti is that duality and its source level. At the same time, by the fact that the two great elements of the divine mystery, the personal and impersonal, are here fused together. Personal and impersonal. This is the experience yogins arrive at. There is on one hand, there is impersonality, other hand, there is personality. fused, and these two are fused together. The seeker of the integral truth, truth with capital T, integral truth, feels the duality of Ishwara-Shakti, his closeness to a more intimate and ultimate secret of the divine transcendence and manifestation than that offered to him by any other experience. So when the seeker of integral truth arrive at the experience of Ishwara-Shakti, that is the most fulfilling, convincing, self-evident truth, integral truth, that gives the integral picture far better than any other duality in its oneness experience, whether it is Brahman Maya or Purusha Prakriti. It is an Ishwara-Shakti. You see the transcendent and manifestation in perfect integration. It is one whole, that which transcends the creation, the manifestation and that which is beyond manifestation, held in its totality by Ishwara-Shakti. Across the full spectrum, down the matter to all the way to the Satchidananda, everything is held together by Ishwara-Shakti. At the same time, by the fact that the two great elements of the divine mystery, the personal and impersonal, are here fused together. The seeker of the integral truth feels the duality of Ishwara-Shakti, his closeness, feels in the duality of Ishwara-Shakti, his closeness to a more intimate and ultimate secret of the divine transcendence and the manifestation than that offered to him by any other experience. So the seeker of integral truth can have different types of experiences, whether it is Purusha Prakriti or Brahman Maya. And it is when he arrives at Ishwara-Shakti experience across the spectrum, there is a complete integral truth known. For the Ishwara-Shakti, divine consciousness force and world mother, divine conscious force and world mother, becomes a mediatrix between the eternal one and the manifested many. Mediatrix, the one who mediates across the spectrum. On one side is the eternal one, one being. Out of that one being, the whole creation proceeds. And there is a whole process of creation. There the duality come into the picture. The one being with its two polarity. And in that there is this conscious force and world mother who becomes the mediatrix between the eternal one and manifest many. So on one side, there is this manifestation, world of matter, multiplicity, where evolution is happening. And that evolutionary process is mediated by this conscious force, who is the world mother, presiding over the manifestation and mediating between these two poles of one being, who brings the ascending current and descending current. The current of involution that is bringing things downward into matter, pouring into matter higher and higher possibilities, and an ascension that is evolving out of matter, the life emerging, mind emerging, beyond mind, the supermind. This journey is mediated by the world mother, the Shakti, conscious force. For the Ishwari-Shakti, before I read by mistake, it as Ishwara-Shakti. It is here she is saying Ishwari-Shakti. Ishwara-Shakti is the duality put together as a one word, Ishwara-Shakti. Ishwari-Shakti is a specific reference to the Ishwara's creative dimension, Ishwari-Shakti. For the Ishwari-Shakti, divine conscious force and world mother becomes a mediatrix between the eternal one and manifested many. And that is the reason why in integral yoga, the divine Shakti, the world mother, she becomes the key to yoga because she mediates between this whole two poles of one being with the whole spectrum of hierarchy of planes in between. On one side, by the play of the energies which she brings from the one, by the play of energies which she brings from the one. So the one being, out of that, she brings out of the many energies are brought forth. Out of the infinite potentiality, many energies are brought forth. She manifests the multiple divine in the universe. So from the one, the multiple divine in the universe. There is a multiplicity of divinity itself created, involving and evolving its endless appearances out of her revealing substance. Her revealing substance. There is the spiritual substance, the divine substance. Out of that, it is revealed. So there is one, out of that many energies are brought out, and multiple divine in the universe are brought forth, involving and evolving. There is an involutionary process where it is brought from the one. There is a progressive manifestation towards increasingly bound, limited, all the way down to matter. That is an involution. Then there is an evolution, that is an ascension. The involving and evolving, its endless appearances out of her revealing substance. It is she who makes the one gets involved in all the steps that she is unfolding. And she also evolves out of it, the one who is involved. So involving and evolving, its endless appearances out of her revealing substance. On the other, by the reascending current of the same energies. So what on one side is descending movement, involving more and more, and then the other is the reascending current of the same energies. She leads back all towards that from which they have issued, so that the soul in its evolutionary manifestation may more and more return towards the divinity there, or here put on its divine character. It's a profound picture. From the one, there is a descending current brought forth by the divine Shakti, the world mother, who creates the hierarchy of worlds, the planes of existence, involving the one divine, one supreme, into increasingly limited forms all the way down to matter. So there is a descending current where there is an involution of that full eternal timeless consciousness brought down, and it is involved here and entirely contained within the framework of matter. And then there is an ascension, the material forms interacting, and it slowly liberates the involved spirit in it. It opens up, and then out of matter comes life, out of life comes mind, and out of mind, now supermind is evolving according to Sri Aurobindo. That is mediated by the divine Shakti, who pushes things forward. And there are two options here for the yogins. One is to liberate oneself from the matter and ascend, dropping the physical frameworks all the way into the timeless. Other is now connect with the timeless, at the same time retain the link with the material ground, so that you become the ladder, the bridge, so that what is above can pour down further and further into this limited mold of matter and make the material evolution happening in matter itself. the very world of forms evolving so that it can express increasingly more and more perfect consciousness of the divine. The divine light and force can express itself through the molds of material nature. So that's the second possibility, is what we are looking at in integral yoga, where on one hand we need to ascend into higher levels, connect and bring that into lower range. Here the ascending current and descending current together creates the process of transformation, and we can see that embodied, encrypted in Sri Aurobindo's symbol. There is an ascending triangle as a descending triangle, intersection forming a perfect square, where there are 7 planes as like the ocean, and in which a lotus is blooming. That contains symbolically the entire cosmic structure, the process of manifestation, the process of evolution, involution, evolution, and process of yoga. It's a profound symbol containing this incredible knowledge encoded visually. So on one side, by the play of the energies which she brings out from the one, she manifests the multiple divine in the universe, involving and evolving its endless appearances out of her revealing substance. On the other, by the reascending current of the same energies, she leads back all towards that from which they have issued, so that the soul in its evolutionary manifestation may more and more return to the divinity there, or here put on its divine character. So being here on earth, one can put on, or one can bring out the divine consciousness into the world of matter. That is a possibility. There is not in her, although she devises a cosmic mechanism, the character of an inconscient mechanical executrix. So in Shakti, the moment we are referring to as Shakti or the World Mother, there is no mechanical aspect in her. It is all conscious. Everything down to the last particle is conscious. Whereas Prakriti picture is initially seen from the mechanical aspect. Everything is mechanical in the nature. Whereas when you see Shakti in operation, it is not mechanical, it is an absolutely conscious force. World Mother. She devises a cosmic mechanism, the character of an inconscient mechanical executrix, which we find in the first physiognomy of Prakriti, the nature force. So the Prakriti appears to be a machinery created by her. Neither is there the sense of unreality, creatrix of illusions or semi-illusions, which is attached to our first view of Maya. So Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. These are 3 different ways of experiencing the dynamic side. When we experience it as Maya, it is illusion or semi-illusion that veils the truth. When you experience it as Prakriti, it is a mechanical nature, the machinery of nature. Whereas when you see it as Shakti, it is conscious force presiding over manifestation, mediating the process of manifestation and the process of evolution. She is the conscious force. And in her, both this aspect, mechanical aspect, or the illusory aspect are not there, because it's a conscious force. There is not in her, although she devises a cosmic mechanism, the character of an inconscient mechanical executrix, which we find in the first physiognomy of Prakriti, the nature force. Neither is there that sense of an unreality, creatrix of illusions or semi-illusions, which is attached to our first view of Maya. It is at once clear to the experiencing soul that there is a conscious power of one substance and nature with the Supreme, from whom she came. So she is the power of the Supreme. She has come from the Supreme and she is the power of the Supreme. One substance and nature with the Supreme. They are not separate at all. One being in these two poises. It is power aspect, creative power aspect of the Supreme. One substance and nature with the Supreme from whom she came. So this is something that we can experience. If she seems to have plunged us into the ignorance and inconscience, she, the Divine Mother, seems to have plunged us into the inconscience and ignorance. That is the world of matter. It's inconscient, it's bound by ignorance, and it seems she has plunged us into it as part of her creative process. In pursuance of a plan we cannot yet interpret. So she seems to be pursuing a plan, but we, the human, with our limited cognitive capacity of the mind, we are unable to interpret. We are unable to understand what is her master plan. In pursuance of her plans we cannot yet interpret. If her forces present themselves as all these ambiguous forces of the universe, and all the forces of the universe are her forces, and for us they seems to be ambiguous because of our limited capacity to comprehend. If her forces present themselves as all these ambiguous forces of the universe, yet it becomes visible before long that she is working for the development of the divine consciousness in us. This is her project. She is working for the development of the divine consciousness in us. We, the humans on earth, in us, she is working towards developing the divine consciousness. Our current consciousness is not divine. It is bound by limitations. It is the ignorance of the mind, stumbling and groping for knowledge. Whereas there is a true divine consciousness which is there but beyond this world. And she wants to develop that divine consciousness here in this world, and that is her work. It becomes visible before long that she is working for the development of the divine consciousness in us, and that she stands above, drawing us to her own higher entity. So on one hand, it seems she has plunged us into this ignorance, into this inconscience. Yet we see that she stands above and she is drawing like a magnet, pulling us upward into the divine reality. She stands above, drawing us to her own higher entity, revealing to us more and more the very essence of the divine knowledge, will, and Ananda. She is pulling us upward into her own divine nature and progressively revealing to us her own divine knowledge, will, and Ananda. Therefore, she is also referred to as Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi, Satyamayi. And she mediates the process. On one hand, she has plunged everything into this inconscience. She is creating and she is building the worlds. On the other hand, she stands above all and draws like a magnet, and she is the bridge connecting the two. She is present simultaneously in the entire scale of existence. If she seems to have plunged us into the ignorance and inconscience, in pursuance of a plan we cannot yet interpret, in her forces present themselves, if her forces present themselves as all these ambiguous forces of the universe, yet it becomes visible before long that she is working for the development of the divine consciousness in us, and that she stands above, drawing us to her own higher entity, revealing to us more and more of the very essence of the divine knowledge, will, and Ananda. Even in the ignorance, the soul of the seeker becomes aware of her conscious guidance, supporting his steps and leading them slowly or swiftly, straight or by many detours out of the darkness into the light of a greater consciousness. We live in ignorance and we are searching. We are seekers. Even in this ignorance, the more we observe, we can see there is a guiding support. There is a wisdom, Sri Aurobindo refers as a mother wisdom, guiding us, leading us, sometimes slowly, sometimes swiftly. And this becomes visible to the seeker. There is a force, a wisdom that is guiding, intervening into our process of awakening and growth. It was always there in nature, behind the processes of nature, but we become more and more conscious of that guiding wisdom and power. So even in the movements of the ignorance, the soul of the seeker becomes aware of her conscious guidance, supporting his steps and leading them slowly or swiftly, straight or by many detours. So we need not be progressing, or we may not be, usually that's the case, progressing straight, usually with a lot of detours. Some people go straight. When you have that direct contact with her, the path becomes straight. Otherwise, path become more and more crooked when we are lost, wandering here and there. Slowly or swiftly, straight or by many detours, out of the darkness into light, from tamas to light, out of darkness into light of a greater consciousness. We are moving from our limited, narrow consciousness into a greater, wider consciousness. Out of mortality into immortality, out of evil and suffering towards the highest good and felicity, of which, as yet, in his human mind can form only a faint image. So the great chant, Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. The very ancient chant. The three fundamental shift from non-being to being, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. That's the kind of evolutionary journey we make. Out of darkness to light of a greater consciousness. Out of mortality to immortality. Out of evil and suffering towards a higher good and felicity, of which as yet this human mind can form only a faint image. So of that journey and that highest possibility, our human mind can only get a very, very faint image. Thus her power is at once liberative and dynamic, creative, effective. The power of the divine Shakti, different from Prakriti, different from Maya. Power of Shakti is at once liberative and dynamic, creative, effective. Creative not only of things as they are, but of things that are to be. So she can create within what is possible in the current situation, current formation. She can also bring from the higher realms, the nobler patterns, and what can potentially be. All that possibilities opens up when we open to the Shakti. But of things that are to be, for eliminating the twisted and tangled movements of his lower consciousness made of the stuff of the ignorance, it builds, it rebuilds, and remakes his soul and nature into the substance and forces of a higher divine nature. When Shakti operates, when the Divine Mother enters and we collaborate with her, surrender to her action consciously, and she takes up everything, our soul and our substance, our instrumentation, and reshapes everything, rebuilds everything into its original divine possibility that is already inherent, involved. She brings out that possibility. That only she can do. Our human mind and its limited intelligence cannot know, because it can only have some partial, vague image of the possibility. She knows the true divine possibility. Our human mind cannot know. That's why in integral yoga, it is absolutely central to surrender to the divine Shakti and let her do the sadhana of transformation, so that unrealized possibilities can be brought forth and poured into the mold of material existence and reveal and transform this limited nature into the nature of divine consciousness. Thus, her power is at once liberative and dynamic, creative and effective. Here it's good to just dwell once again on that liberative side. In Purusha Prakriti, when it is separative, it liberates the Purusha consciousness, and you will see the world as a mechanical machinery running. In the Brahman Maya framework, when you separate the two, you liberate into the pure Brahman consciousness, and initially Maya appears as an illusion. Later, if you unite them, then you will realize Maya as the creative power of Brahman. Whereas when you are starting with the Ishwara-Shakti framework, Ishwara-Shakti approach, there when you're opening to the Shakti, she not only liberates, but that liberation is not into the static self, but the very nature is dynamic. So on one hand, she liberates, and she is making you creative and effective, makes you dynamic, creative not only of things as they are, but of things that are to be, for eliminating the twisted and tangled movements. Lower nature's movements are twisted and tangled with full of wastage. And all that she takes up, make it simple, straight path of progress. Of his lower consciousness made of stuff of the ignorance, it rebuilds and new makes his soul and nature into the substance and forces of a higher divine nature. That is the promise of the Shakti. She not only liberates, she is also dynamic, creative, and effective. She brings all the future possibilities onto the human nature, into the human mold, and pushes the evolution of the human nature to the divine ranges of possibility. In this duality too, there is possible a separative experience. So Sri Aurobindo is not saying there is absolutely no separative experience possible in this duality of Ishwara-Shakti. There is also a separative experience possible. At one pole of it, the seeker may be conscious only of the master of existence. That's a possibility. On one pole, when you ascend to that pole, you may become aware only of the master of existence, putting forth on him his energies of knowledge, power, and bliss to liberate and divinize. The Shakti may appear to him only an impersonal force expressive of things, or an attribute of the Ishwara. So Shakti may appear to him only as an impersonal force, not yet that intimate sense of connection and oneness. There is an impersonal force working in the universe. That is kind of first experience of the Shakti. She appears to be very impersonal. Force expressive of these things. These things are the energies of knowledge, power, and bliss. Expressive of these things, or an attribute of the Ishwara. She may be expressing an attribute or expressive of these things. So let's read that once again. At one pole of it, the seeker may be conscious only of the master of existence, putting forth on him his energies of knowledge, power, and bliss to liberate and divinize. The Shakti may appear to him only an impersonal force expressive of these things or an attribute of the Ishwara. Shakti may appear to be only an attribute of the Ishwara. At the other pole, he may encounter the world mother, creatrix of the universe, referred to as the Aditi in the Vedas, putting forth the gods and the worlds and all things and existences out of her spirit substance. All the gods are born out of world mother. So this is there in the Puranas, in the Vedas, we see there is gods and God. And there is mother of gods, referred as Aditi. And from her all the gods takes birth, the cosmic personalities. So you may encounter the world mother, from whom she is the creatrix of the universe, putting forth the gods and the worlds and all things in existences out of her spirit substance. It is out of her spirit substance she is putting forth the gods, the worlds, the entire creation. So on one side you experience the world mother, other side is the master of existence. Or even if he sees both aspects, it may be with an unequal separating vision, subordinating one to the other, regarding Shakti only as a means for approaching the Ishwara. Even if you see both, you may still consider that Shakti only as a means of approaching the Ishwara. There is a kind of imbalance in the vision. You see her only as a means. There thus results a one-sided tendency or lack of balance, a power of effectuation not perfectly supported, or a light of revelation not perfectly dynamic. So when you see Shakti only as a means to ascend, to approach the Ishwara, then there is an imbalance. As a result, the revelation of knowledge need not be effective force in action. Power of effectuation not perfectly supported, or a light of revelation not perfectly dynamic. When there is Divine Mother acting with her conscious force, she reveals, not only reveals, there is a dynamic aspect that is effective, make things happen, get things done. That effectivity may not be there if you look Shakti only as a means to ascend to the Ishwara, the Supreme, and not really opening to her dynamic side really is effective. There results a one-sided tendency or lack of balance, a power of effectuation not perfectly supported, or a light of revelation not perfectly dynamic. It is when a complete union of the two sides of the duality is effected and rules his consciousness that he begins to open to a fuller power that will draw him altogether out of the confused clash of ideas and forces here into a higher truth and enable the descent of that truth to illumine and deliver and act sovereignly upon this world of ignorance. So on one side there is a liberative side. Like a magnet, she pulls you upward. Then there is a descending movement, descending current of her force. That is what brings the dynamism of effectuation in the world, not only revealing the possibilities but also making things happen, and transmits into the world her powers and personalities. So unless we open to that descending current of her power, we cannot truly see her in action. Otherwise, we may limit ourselves to only the ascension supported by her magnetic presence above, pulling us upward. It is when a complete union of the two sides of the duality is effected and rules his consciousness. We have to see the complete union of the two sides of the duality is effected and rules our consciousness. It has to be the master of our consciousness, that he begins to open to a fuller power that will draw him altogether out of the confused clash of ideas and forces here. So it will, on one hand, it will draw him altogether out of the confused clash of ideas and forces here into a higher truth. So first it will liberate you, lift you up into a higher truth beyond this world that is a world of discord, confusion, clash of ideas and forces. It will take you into a higher truth, capital T, a dynamic truth where everything is harmonious and oneness in action, truth of oneness. From there, the descent of that truth to illumine and deliver and act sovereignly upon this world of ignorance. It is once you're liberated and lifted into that dynamic truth where everything is held together without any discord, a perfect harmony of the divine truth. From there, it descends into the limited mold and pushes the boundaries, transforms everything into its divine possibility within the world of our material existence. In fact, into all the triple worlds of the mind, life, and body, all the three instrumentation gets transformed into the divine possibilities they potentially are capable. He has begun to lay his hands on the great integral secret. That is when the integral secret is revealed, which is in its fullness can be grasped only when he overpasses the double term that reigns here of knowledge inextricably intertwined with original ignorance. There is knowledge intertwined with ignorance, avidya. When we go beyond them, that is when you can arrive at integral secret and crosses the border where spiritual mind disappears into supramental gnosis. Our mind itself has spiritual ranges, and beyond that, it can enter into supramental gnosis. He is only indicating that here, he will not elaborate it here. So we have our normal human mind steeped in ignorance, bound in narrowness, and what the Divine Mother, the Divine Consciousness does is she lifts us out of this entanglement. And in that ascension, there are spiritual ranges of the mind where truth becomes increasingly straight, clear, and more effective. And she lifts you all the way through the ranges of the spiritualized mind. And finally, you arrive at the supramental gnosis. That is where the dynamic and static truth of the divine consciousness is perfectly in harmony. All the world forces in harmony, united, harmonious. That is where you arrive at the integral truth, integral secret, the secret of the supramental consciousness and its force. So he has begun to lay his hand on the integral secret, which in its fullness can be grasped only when he overpasses the double term that reigns here of knowledge inextricably intertwined with the original ignorance and crosses the border where spiritual mind disappears into supramental gnosis. It is through this third and most dynamic dual aspect of the one that the seeker begins with the most integral completeness to enter into the deepest secret of the being of the Lord of the sacrifice. This third dual aspect of the Ishwara-Shakti gives the seeker the most perfect way of discovering the deepest secret of the being of the Lord of the sacrifice. Sacrifice, all our action, everything that is unfolding in our daily life is an offering to the divine. And we have to discover the Lord of the sacrifice. And to discover the Lord of the sacrifice, this duality of Ishwara-Shakti is the master clue, because it is this Shakti who is the conscious presence presiding across the creation with its her ascending and descending movements, who lifts us out of this entanglement with this ignorance, and step by step she lifts us all the way towards supramental Gnosis, which gives us the key to the transformation of the world. And from there she brings down, she descends into the molds here below, into the mind, into the life, into the matter, and transforms them, liberates them. And there we discover the Lord of the sacrifice, the deepest secret of the Lord of the sacrifice. It is through this third and most dynamic dual aspect. It is the third one. First one is the Brahman Maya. Second one is the Purusha Prakriti. Third one is the Ishwara-Shakti. It is through this third and most dynamic dual aspect of the one that the seeker begins with the most integral completeness. Begins with the most integral completeness to enter into the deepest secret of the being of the Lord of the sacrifice. The mystery of mystery can be discovered with the help of the duality of Ishwara-Shakti. So that is the end of today's episode, where we have covered Ishwara and Shakti, contrasted them with Purusha Prakriti and Brahman Maya. Here the Ishwara-Shakti gives us the most perfect means to arrive as the deepest secret of the Lord of the sacrifice. Please do subscribe to this channel so that you can get notification. You can also get our newsletter by subscribing to it. The link is in the description. Thank you, and see you next week.